Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz's battleground state tour seems to be paying off in the polls. A New York Times Sienna poll has the Democratic ticket leading in 3 key battleground states. She has a 4-point edge in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And those are all states that Harris and Walz made stops in last week. And on the Republican side, former President Donald Trump will be looking for virtual eyes tonight. Trump is returning, at least for the moment, to do a new live interview Monday on X with its owner, Elon Musk. The platform, formerly known as Twitter, had banned the former president following the January 6th riot. His account was reinstated after Musk took over the platform in 2022. For more on all of this, Bob Costa and Weijia Jiang join us. Bob is with me here in studio, and Weijia is at the White House tonight. Thank you both for being here. Bob, I want to start with you. These poll numbers, Kamala Harris has a slight edge, but the margin of error is also 4 points in these polls. So we know this is going to be a tight race through the fall. But I'm curious what you make of this race, changing a bit.
It appears, based on this recent poll, that Vice President Harris is keeping together President Biden's coalition in the industrial Midwest and some of these other battleground states, but obviously exciting Democrats who might have been on the sidelines, or some traditional Republicans or non-voters who have been so far a little bit lax when it comes to engaging with this campaign.
And Weijia, I'm curious what you were hearing covering the Harris campaign, what they make of these numbers. I mean, last week you were telling us about how this is a campaign that sees themselves as the underdog.
And that's exactly what the vice president said during a rally over the weekend in Las Vegas. When this poll came out, she said, let's not pay too much attention to the polls because we know it's going to be very tight until the very end. And she said again during this huge rally that we still have a lot of work to do, because the concern is that all the momentum that we are seeing will start to dwindle. And obviously, she wants to remind people that there's still plenty of time left between now and November for things to change again, which is why they're not celebrating too much these polls. But internally, sources are, of course, excited. And, they say the reason it matters to them mostly is because it validates the change on the ticket, the top of the ticket, because Biden never had this kind of lead. So I think that's the reference point that they're looking at. Not exactly just Trump, but Harris v. Biden, showing that she is doing better than he ever was.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because the Trump campaign told us last week that their own internal numbers show that Kamala Harris has consolidated the Democratic base and has been successful in rallying the base. So that's a significant movement. Bob, you, Weijia, and I have all covered Donald Trump for a long time, and we know that Twitter, now known as X, is so a part of him. The idea that he is returning tonight to do this interview with Elon Musk on X, what does that say to you about kind of where this campaign is right now?
He is going back to a social media platform that was a huge help for his campaign in 2016 when he was just starting to enter presidential politics. His tweets drove the conversation in 2015 and 2016, helped him win the White House in the sense of providing him with his ability to, as he once told me, dive into the news cycle, to just kind of see what's happening, weigh in on it, offer commentary. And he's built his own Truth Social platform that has provided him with an ability to have this kind of long-form space to write mini essays and posts and sometimes screeds against his opponents. But by coming back to X, he's also aligning himself a little bit more with the Elon Musk orbit, which is a certain kind of conservative tilting person who's very plugged in with Silicon Valley technology and often Republican politics.
Yeah, and Weijia, I know you covered the Trump White House, so I know those late-night tweets were part and parcel of everything you had to deal with covering the White House. But I also want to ask you about Harris and some policies she's been introducing. Because at a rally over the weekend, she said that her administration would get rid of tax on tips for service workers. I know today you asked the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, about this. Of course, this was something that Trump announced that he would do a couple of months ago. What did she say? What did the White House say?
So the reason we are pressing on this, Caitlin, is because this is one of the first policy proposals that we have heard from Vice President Harris, along with raising minimum wage. As you mentioned, she says that she supports eliminating taxes on tips, which in Las Vegas, where she made this announcement, is a huge deal for the people who work in the service industry, in the restaurant industry. But as you mentioned, this is an idea that Trump rolled out in June, and he accused Harris of stealing it from her. In fact, he wrote on X, as Robert was just mentioning, about how she copied his idea. So we were trying to drill down on whether that was true or whether this was an organic idea of hers, something that she and President Biden have discussed before. So here's what she had to say.
Obviously it's a new idea. I'm just saying that we support it, but we have been doing the work, right, for hardworking Americans to lower cost. And that is something you're going to see that on Thursday with both the president and the vice president when they make an announcement on other ways or other additional ways to lower cost.
So before that, there were several other attempts to just try to get some clarity about whether this is an idea that the Biden-Harris administration had ever considered in the past 3.5 years. And you heard her say there that it's, in fact, a new idea. And the reason, again, why this matters is because we have heard very few ideas at all from the vice president about her plans to, increase, to help the U.S. economy.
Yeah, and we'll see if more rolls out over the next few days before the Democratic National Convention. Bob, meanwhile, J.D. Vance has been doing a lot of interviews, and he actually advocated for a policy that is more in line with what Democrats have proposed. Let's take a listen.
I think one of the things that you can do is make it bigger per child. I think we'd love to see it at a higher dollar value. And again, President Trump and I have proposed that. I mean, look, I'd love to see a child tax credit that's $5,000 per child, but you, of course, have to work with Congress to see how possible and viable that is.
He's talking about a child tax credit. And again, all of these policies, we'll see whether a Congress can pass them. But what do you make of that? And also the idea that J.D. Vance was on all the Sunday shows this weekend trying to make a point.
It's a new point, but actually an old point from Senator J.D. Vance. He is wading into a debate inside the Republican Party about tax policy that's been going on for a long time. In fact, the first time I ever encountered J.D. Vance was he was a writer getting his kind of sea legs as a commentator over a decade ago, writing in conservative publications. And at that time, there was a debate over the child tax credit in the briefest possible terms. People like the Wall Street Journal editorial page, the editors there, oppose child tax credit on an ideological ground. They say that providing all of these tax credits crowds up tax policy, that tax policy should be clean cut, it should be rate driven, and should not be about credits for this group, credits for that group, because that, in their view, on a conservative movement level, leads to tax policy that's favorable towards certain constituencies rather than having a wholesale effect on the economy that's broader in how it's enacted by Congress and how it's interpreted and understood by taxpayers. Vance, though, is part of this group of conservatives who say we do need to encourage social policy and traditional family values as they see it through tax policy. So it's a melding of economic policy with social and ideological positioning that has really created a debate that's been over a decade plus in the conservative movement. Vance is definitely aligned with saying the only way for the Republican Party to expand its coalition is to bring in new families who might not have a political tilt toward the Republican Party. A tax credit's a way to kind of provide them an impetus to come in. For Trump, it's interesting because he's so aligned sometimes with the business wing, but he put on the ticket someone who is more willing to tinker and tweak tax policy.
Yeah, and we'll see if that has an appeal among those persuadable voters, particularly in the suburbs that both of these campaigns are trying to reach. A lot of policy discussion on this politics show, so we're glad to have both of you, Bob Costa and Weijia Jiang, to break it all down for us. Thank you so much.